Hi guys, Jesus here, back with the third video in the cannoning tutorial series here for you guys. And in this one I'm gonna go over some bit more advanced things that we might have discussed in the last videos that you've heard about and how to implement them in practice. So the first thing we're going to go over is hammering. Now, for any cannon that stacks more than maybe a few pieces of sand, you need a hammer, which is a very important component that when the sand arrives at the wall, shoots the sand down into a stack, because if you do not do this, the sand will just all fall within one block, no matter how much sand you have, and maybe stack 1 or 2 blocks at the bottom, and the rest will just drop. As a little demonstration here, I have this 20 stacker here. Let's see, this is a 20 stacker, right? I want to disable the scatter, and I'm going to disconnect my hammer. Now let's see what happens if I fire this. I get all my sand here. Now this is 20 sand, but what happens is it just falls down here in one block, because obviously we can't shoot out 20 sand in a row. That would not work very well with this cannon. So what you need to do is have this hammer here, which flies above the sand and explodes at the wall, hammering the sand down into a stack. Now we have stacked 20 sand here, because it was hammered down, it didn't just fall. Now, in theory that's really simple. You just blow up some TNT above the sand that arrives here at the wall. But in practice this can get a bit tricky, especially if you're working with higher numbers of sand. You will need a lot of TNT. The approximate number is 3 TNT for every sand that you want to stack on 1/16, which is also another reason why cannoning is much harder than on 1.8, because the requirement is much higher. Now we can demonstrate this very easily with this little cannon I've built here. That just to actually stack a few of these sand blocks that fall in here, not all of these are going to be stacked, we need all this TNT. I think I've had my ladder enabled here and such that we should be able to demonstrate that for, well, it's not working now for whatever reason. And we've got here a broken carpet come. Alright, place this back. Well, as I said, this should be able to demonstrate quite clearly that just to stack a few sand blocks you need this much hammer. Just to stack those 4 sand blocks here. This is the entire hammer that you need. Which obviously makes things quite tricky, which makes you end up on a 20 stacker with a hammer like this here, which is the same size as the power, and this is not a Parafusion, this is a guider design, so it obviously uses a bit less power. But there's 2 main ways of basically actually hammering the sand down here with this hammer then. So the first would obviously be just shooting the hammer above the sand. Since you can't shoot them in the same block, it will not hammer down. So the way you do this, as also with these 2 cannons here, is you use a guiders, or let's say the barrel roof. As you can see, this is the area in which the sand is kept over here. And this gets aligned here into the barrel. Now you will see this barrel groove where the sand is very low. When the cannon fires from here, it will align with this and shoot straight out of the cannon onto the wall. Now the hammer is aligned from here with this sticky piston into the barrel groove like this, and it is going to shoot out one block higher. Now this will work, it's going to hammer this sand down since it's one block above, and you also need only one power to fire this whole thing. But a big issue with this design is a very big issue, that this does not fusion. So what that means is if your hole is very low in the wall, or there is some kind of a region filter system in place, or a filter system in general, this will not work, since you cannot shoot through one block with this, since the hammer is higher. So what you do in more advanced designs, more advanced cannons, is you use a parafusion design. What that means is a parallel fusion, as I've already explained, I think. And that means instead of shooting the hammer higher than the sand, you shoot it later, so the sand has time to drop down. This will mean that they can both pass through this gap. First comes the sand, starts to fall down, then comes the hammer and hammers it. That's a way better design, you can fusion with that. But basically what this means is that you need a kind of two-phase power design. Like in this case of this cannon, this is a first phase of the power and this is the second phase. The second phase goes off 2 ticks later. And in between those 2 ticks, on the first phase the sand gets shot out, and in between those 2 ticks we put the hammer into the aligner, and then the hammer gets shot out only 2 ticks later, which can lead to some more complex designs. You could double pulse your power, or you would need a more power assemblies. Like in this case I've just built 2 because it's easier. So there is a lot of drawbacks to this as well, but this is generally the route you want to go if you're making a more advanced cannon. Now, how you actually implement this in your cannon is up to you. Obviously, you need to choose one of the designs. A very popular method of implementing a parafusion is the two-sided power, which means you have these 2 sides of the power and you just add 2 ticks to one of them. So this side would go off 2 ticks earlier, you align them like a normal power in the same block. That makes it really easy to design a parafusion cannon. That's just a nice trick I like to have on hand. Now we're gonna go over concrete cannons. That's also some technology that is new in the newer versions of the game, that's especially used in 1.16. Now this is something you really want to have, as it can be quite handy, because some people only put water on their base walls. Now this only works in water, but what this basically does is it shoots a concrete powder into the wall instead of a sand. Now you only need one, since once this hits the wall it will solidify into a concrete block here on the wall. Now the problem with this is you need a lot of power, especially if they have more water on their walls, deeper going walls. Since this concrete powder instantly solidifies when it hits water, it would normally just solidify right here or even in front of that. But it takes one game tick or one time of the game calculating everything to get this effect, and this effect comes after the movement calculations, which means if you in this one game tick shoot the concrete powder to the end of the wall, then you'll be good. But you also need to shoot it very fast for that, so you need a lot of power for a cannon like this. Now then you will just have some scatter that will go off the moment after this solidified, so it doesn't drop out, it's still in this block, and basically saves you from stacking any walls. Makes it very easy to raid some smaller bases Now let's just demonstrate this here with this little cannon here. This is my adjustable concrete cannon. I think I've already shot at this height, so let's go a bit higher again. I need to find a spot on this wall where I haven't really shot yet, so I can demonstrate this. Now this should be good. Let's fire off a shot here. As you can see, the concrete hits here and then has TNT explode inside of it. And this can punch through a lot of layers on a watered wall. The main drawback to this is it won't bust the region at all, and it won't get through any lava walls, since the powder doesn't solidify in lava, right? So yes, that's the main issue with this. So on a lava wall this just becomes a very dumb one stacker. Alright, now let's go over a scatter while we're at it. A scatter is TNT that you usually use to break the blocks, or in most cases hybrid into the concrete or a sand stack. Now this is usually added with some kind of tower design. Let's see very often, especially on smaller cannons, where it goes somewhat like this. That's actually a very handy thing to know how to build as well, are these towers of dispensers that you see on many different cannons. How these often are built is that you have in the two corners these redstone dusts here, and these all power these dispensers here. The dispensers always power the ones on top of them as well if they're directly powered. So this powers this and this powers this and this, and obviously these two. So you still need to activate this, and what you can do is just use repeaters like this right here. To power these all. So now you would power this, which would power all of these, which would through them then power this redstone, which would power all of these as well. And so you power the whole tower here on the same tick. You can just go higher with this. That's a very commonly used design. You also often see it just like this in a compression, like here for example. So this is very handy to know how to build. What you also often have on a scatter is a clock, to have different delays on the TNT to make it all go off in a chain and create bigger damage. The most commonly used clock for this is a comparator clock, which you do by placing a comparator, turning it on, putting these 3 TNT into it, and then when this is powered, this pulses sometimes. This pulses 5 times for these dispensers with a normal button. So this will then give you this nice big power for a scatter here that you can add into your cannon. Next, let's talk nuke. Nuke is basically the same as a scatter that you use in your sand stack to hybrid the wall, but a nuke has a equivalent amount of TNT to your sand stack, and it has a hammer by itself. That means when you hammer the sand with the nuke inside of it down, every part of the stack will have TNT inside of it, and it will blow up the whole wall. That's all a nuke really means. Now, something else I can show you really quickly here, which you also might want to implement in your cannon, is this booster here. So you might wonder, if you have these small powers here, right, they use a compression like this, where, if I show you this TNT explodes, shoots all of this TNT into here, and then that goes off there. That's all fine. But this starts getting an issue when you build bigger powers. So you see some big cannons, like 200s maybe, have these long rows of power with just dispensers on all the sides, and you start to wonder if this goes off here, it will only reach about 7 blocks. Anything with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, this would be the last block. If a TNT is here and this compression would go off, this TNT would barely get affected and maybe just go to here. So this is where these boosters here come in, that you can have at the bottom of your power. They will go off in a row like this. First this will go off, then this, and this, and this. And what that means basically is all this TNT here first gets compressed to here, then to here, then this explodes and it gets compressed to here, and then this explodes and it gets compressed to the end. With that you can have really big powers without having to like split them into multiple parts. There's also boosters for sand as well that look pretty similar and just have them next to carpet compression, which brings us on to the next point, which is the sand compressions or carpet compressions. So you might see designs on this like cannons quite often, and you don't understand them because the sand falls down here. It would just turn into a block, right? So if we have all this sand dropping into the cannon, this would happen, right? Or if there's maybe something below it that wouldn't allow the sand to stack, it would just break. But we need to somehow keep the sand alive until we're ready to put it into the barrel of the cannon and shoot it out. Especially for large stackers, we need to have a lot of sand in there, and we can't just have the huge stack until we shoot it. There is no way to really do that. So that's where sand compressions come in. Now you might know some ways to do this already, like very vanilla kind of ways that are used in cannoning, and you can use if you figure out a good way to do so. One of these things that I've used before in my compressions on my 40 stacker, for example, is soul sand. Obviously the soul sand and water will float the sand up and keep the block alive for a while. So you could just drop more into this, and now you're compressing sand here. Now you just need to figure out a way to compress this into the side of a cannon, and you're all good. Something I've also figured out with this soul sand, which might help you a bit, is that if you put a trapdoor on top of here, and then you make this one of the blocks with the water. This top block does not have water, and then the sand will align perfectly up here and just stay still, but it will expire really quickly because it stays still and doesn't bounce anymore. So if you'd use a system like this, you would need to be fast. You could move this up, but then you might get some wiggle again in the sand. It's always a back and forth. Now if you move it like this, you will get some wiggle in the sand. And now if you have it down here, that won't be an issue, but also the sand will expire pretty fast, and it won't be up a full block. So if you want to compress it out of here, you would need this to be open this far. There's a lot of drawbacks to the soul sand compressions. And there's also other kinds of compression, something you've probably seen in a lot of cannons, like the 420 cannon, for example, is a cobweb compression, where the sand drops into the cobweb, then this gets broken and pushed out with a piston. Biggest problem with this, you need to replace the cobwebs every time you use it. So that's a lot of effort, really doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm gonna show you the most common and probably one of the most powerful ways to compress a sand, which is a carpet compression. What this does in theory, if you know about redstone, is it swaps a carpet every game tick, so that will not allow the sand that lies on the carpet to hit the ground and expire. So what we do here is we get some kind of block to put under there. The carpets itself that are moving will not obstruct any power exposure. So if you were to have this carpet moving here and the TNT blows up here, it will not obstruct the power, but anything you have under this carpet, which you need to have a block under it, will. So a commonly used thing is slabs, which will not allow you to activate from the bottom. You could use signs even from the side if you wanted to. Something that I've also figured out that not a lot of people know is that if you use a fence under it, since the fence is bounding box or hitbox I should say, well, collision box for entities, it is actually 1.5 blocks high and not 1 block, so you can't jump over it even though it's only a 1 block in size. So what this will allow you to do, even if you have the carpet comp over it, if you now put a sand onto this carpet comp, it will hover a half a block over the carpet and still not expire, which is very useful. So now the most common way to do this would be just having 2 pistons on each side. You can also make this even wider if you need to, just have more, but that's not really necessary in this case. Just having these pistons on the 2 sides. And now for the kind of clock you want to use for this. It is a very interesting design with a sticky piston and a redstone block. That's the most common clock for the carpet comp. You could use other clocks, but it's gonna get quite hard. So I recommend you just use this one unless you are very good at redstone and you know how to make other clocks. Now another thing with this carpet compression of these clocks, they like to break quite frequently. So what you really want to do is make sure your cannon only turns the carpet comp on while it's compressing sand and then turns it off again, so it doesn't break while you log off, or the clock will break and it could just ruin your cannon. So in this case I've now turned this on, this carpet comp. You can see by the weird bounciness of this carpet, it's a swapping every game tick. So now if I drop entities onto here, they will just get compressed. As I said with the fence here, that uses that system. If I were to not have the fence there, it would just lie on the carpet. So this does, as far as I know, not expire or take a very long time to expire. And then you can just compress this into your cannon with some TNT. So that's the most common way to compress sand. Now let's go over something else, an issue you might have encountered in the past with your cannon, or that you will probably encounter with your cannon if you don't know about it. And that issue is alignment. Well, obviously your stuff has all has to be aligned in a row, right? When you fire, or it will go sideways. But what you might not know is that even though this would be a straight row and this could be your power and your hammer, these might not be aligned even though they're in here like this. If a TNT is trapped between the blocks, it can still have a aligning tendency. Now if you spawn it in with a dispenser anywhere where it's blocked off by blocks on the side, then the TNT will be center aligned to the exact center of the block. The same goes if you move it with a normal piston. If you were to move a prime TNT, sand, whatever, into the middle here, then it would be center aligned. So most your cannons that you've seen or used, which use pistons to push everything in, probably have everything center aligned, so there's no issues. Power gets center aligned, then everything else gets center aligned. But in more advanced cannons where you need to compress stuff in with TNT, let's say you compress in your hammer here. Here's your power, you compress your hammer in from here with TNT. It will align to the left of this block, so your power is still center aligned. Even though you can't really see it, your hammer will be aligned to the left here. And when you shoot, your power middle, the hammer is to the left, so it will go to the left out your barrel. Even if you have a pretty long barrel, this might become an issue. It will still tend to go to the left. So the way you would fix this is by aligning everything on the same axes. For example, what people like to do is just have a 1 TNT next to the power that goes off 1 tick before it explodes, which would align this power to the left side as well, and then you stop having issues because both of these are aligned to the left, so everything would go straight again. I think this cannon has that exact system here. As you can see, this dispenser here is right next to the power and is connected to the same redstone as the power but without a repeater, so this goes off 1 tick before the power and will align the power to the left, since everything else also comes in from the left here. This needs to be aligned to the left. So what you can also use to align to the left or right are obviously stuff that's shot in with TNT or any other means that actually not just move it by an exact amount like a piston, but give it acceleration to hit the wall. So pushing it with a slime block will align it to the side you push it to. Shooting it with TNT will as well. And any other methods you might think of accelerating it, like using water or lava, might align it to the side it gets flown to if it hits the wall. Now this is something very important you need to pay attention to in cannons with a barrel assembly like that. It becomes less important once you have a system like this here with a guider. That's when it starts becoming less important, and you don't have to worry about it all the time, because once your stuff is at the guider and gets the power applied to it, it's gonna all be guided in the same way. Alright, so I think the last thing I want to go over in this tutorial is how to bust a region, because there's a few ways to bust a region wall. So first of all, let's go over what a region actually is. A region is just a short term for a regenerating wall. And the most common way of doing this, there's a lot of region designs, mine shells, region filters that do a lot of different things, but this is the basics of it. You have a wall that has lava sources in the core. This is also why regions are very hard to build, because you need lava sources all the way up. And then you have a flowing water outside of the region, which would then look something like this. Now if a part of this wall was broken, the water will not flow in because it's flowing down, but the lava in the middle is sources and will start to flow out regardless, generating a cobblestone block here. Now this is a region wall, and you might ask, how would you get through this? If you shoot it, it will just regenerate, right? There's lava in the middle. So there's actually multiple ways to get through these regions. The first one is something you might have done before, something that you can use without any cannoning skill really. That would be a flying machine. So obviously, to deactivate this region, in theory, you would want to remove these lava sources inside. So the simplest way to do this is just to push these regenerated blocks with a sticky piston or a piston from a flying machine into the wall here. Now this block was pushed inside of here. Let's just say I pushed these in with a flying machine that flew here. Now if I cannon this wall, the lava will flow down, but since this isn't sources, it's just flowing lava, it will just keep flowing down, won't come out here and regenerate. Now you can just hybrid this wall normally. So that's actually the easiest way of busting this region. The second way would be by double tapping your cannon, which basically means you shoot your cannon twice in a row very fast, and you have your scatter delay, which actually hybrids the wall, very high. So that means if there's a sand stack here, then it takes a while until the TNT in the sand stack actually blows up. and then when it blows up and opens the wall, while the wall is open, your cannon shoots a second time, which will, before this regenerates, shoot into the region and stack sand into the region, removing the sources and opening up the region. That's pretty easy to add on most cannons, especially smaller ones. Generally a lot of cannons can double tap if you just configure them right. Now the next thing would be using the water from the regions, or rather not using it. In that way you would just stack sand or use flying machines to get rid of all the water, which, depending on how the region is watered and designed, might so this would now slowly get rid of all the water. Now if this region was in an actual wall configuration, right, where there is the next region here or here, then we wouldn't have to get rid of the backwater since it would be blocked off anyways. And now obviously with no water, if we open this up, it will flow out, but it can't regenerate. It has no way of doing that. Alright, so now I'm going to demonstrate busting a region with double tapping this cannon here. This should be set up to shoot up there. So let's get this into the right put here. And let's fire this once and see what happens. Right, so there is actually 2 times that I need to stack here. So if I stack here again, we will see what happens here with this region. As you can see, we bust it open, and there's supposed to be lava inside of here. I think this was busted before, but in this case it would regenerate, obviously. That's what the region is supposed to do. So the way to bust this region by double tapping would now to just put this cannon in auto and fire 2 shots after each other. So we stack into the region while it's wide open. So this region is now gonna open up with a very delayed scatter, as you can see, it just opened. And now we already shot again, and we're stacking into this wall. Takes a second to load. Now, since we need to stack twice here, we need to double tap this again, and then the region should be busted. So we activate this here, and we double tap again. On this cannon, the triangles are a bit laggy, so it takes some time to load. Alright, and this region has been busted, as you can see. No longer regenerating. This was completely stacked inside of. And that's how you region bust, by double tapping. That's all I have for this video. In the next tutorials we're actually going to be making some cannons from scratch, and I'll see you then.